Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Before we start today's podcast, I want to talk about the world of banking, a few problems with it. Some banks get it right, some banks don't. And one of the things I love about First Direct here in the UK is how you can reach a person without having to navigate those painful phone menus. And within just a few seconds, a human being answers the phone and can help you pretty much straight away. But if we have anyone from NatWest listening, I learned today that they offer a slightly different experience. I watched a friend wait on hold for 10 minutes before giving up and trying the online chat, which turned out to be an AI chatbot that just kept saying, "I don't understand, can you rephrase that?" to any attempts of any form of human conversation that wasn't just conversed with keywords. And on this show, we always talk about fantastic implementations of technology and how it can enhance customer experiences. Well, today, NatWest taught me a lot about bad tech implementations and how it can actually create a negative experience rather than a positive one. But enough of my ramblings, I went off at a tangent there. Today, I'm going to be talking to Benedikt Bunz, inventor of Bulletproofs, which is a new generation form of zero-knowledge proof technology. And Bulletproofs is proven to be more effective and secure than its predecessor. So I invited the Stanford cryptography expert onto the show. And Benedikt is employing his invention with a new project called Findora. And Findora is building distributed ledgers to decentralize the entire financial industry. And I think we can all agree that the world of banking and finance is ripe for disruption. So if the world of blockchain and crypto intrigues you, or even finance and the future of finance and fintech, then you're in for a treat today. So come and join me in a conversation with Benedikt Bunz. Massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little more about who you are and what you do?
So my name is Benedikt Bunz. I'm still finishing up my PhD at Stanford in cryptography, but I'm also the chief scientist at Findora. And I work on, I do my PhD on cryptography as it applies to cryptocurrencies. So really the underlying tools of cryptocurrencies. And I've done work on things like zero-knowledge proofs, like bulletproofs and Supersonic and things like verifiable delay functions, maybe some things that we will explore a little bit more in this podcast. And at Findora, we're trying to use these technologies to build platforms for really financial systems. So something for asset transfers, like financial assets, like stocks and other things like that.
Excellent. Well, before we dive in and learn all about Findora, I think it's important to understand the exact problems out there. So can you highlight for listeners to this podcast how finance is plagued with pain points and friction points, and maybe provide a few examples out there?
Right. There's a lot of fraud and auditing is hard. And, this is both in the US, you see things like Bernie Madoff but also internationally, in China, there's a lot of these things called peer-to-peer lending. People like you and me can lend money to other, normal customers. So it's actually a pretty cool idea to cut out banks. So the idea is that just normal people can lend money to each other, and there's a lending platform that sort of handles this and matches lenders to creditors to debitors. And the problem is obviously that, with maybe an inability to regulate and audit, that a lot of these lending platforms just ran away with the money and went bankrupt or literally just stole the money. And obviously this is terrible. And the other thing is that there's a lot of, there's a lot of hedge funds, for example, which they're very opaque in what they invest in, and even their own customers don't really know what they invest in, and the auditor doesn't really know what they invest in. And part of that is that the hedge fund does not want to reveal what they invest in because that's their whole business secret. That's the secret sauce which they make money. But that also makes it very hard to audit them and make sure that they only invest in things that the customers are comfortable with, or only secure or more secure assets or certain asset classes, or they follow a risk profile. So there's a lot of problems here with auditing, but also with needs to be always a balance with privacy, such that these because financial instruments have a need for privacy sort of naturally, but that conflicts with the need to audit things.
Well, I think you set the scene perfectly there and highlighted just how many problems there are out there. So on that then, what is Findora and how does it address just some of those problems that we talked about?
At Findora, we're trying to kind of use I guess, the power of blockchain. But so what blockchains are really good at is this auditing transparency aspect. So why is that? Well, because everything is in the public. So if Bitcoin transaction is in the public, everybody can verify that the transaction is correct, right? Everybody can see the transaction, see that the person who sent the transaction had enough money to send it. And that is very sort of fundamental to how these cryptocurrencies work. And you can do more complex rules, right? You can't just do maybe transfer from A to B, but you could have in I guess something like Ethereum, you can have more complex transfers of assets or things following rules, and you're always guaranteed that all of the rules are followed. But there's a big problem with that, is because it actually makes the privacy aspect even worse. So if there's a Bitcoin transaction, then it literally says on the blockchain address A is sending XYZ Bitcoin to address B. And if I know that you own address B, then, for example, if this is your salary, then I can exactly figure out what your salary is. Or, if you're a business paying someone else, paying a supplier, then I can exactly see how much you're paying for your goods, or if you're fund investing in some assets, then I can see exactly how much you're investing into each assets. So blockchains sort of naturally solve the auditing and the transparency aspect of the problem, but they make it actually worse on the privacy side of things. And what we want to do is the good thing is that this is where cryptography comes in. So what is the cryptography can do here? What can it do here? Well, cryptography is about encryption. So what if I just encrypted the transaction such that all of these information are hidden? Well, then I have perfect privacy. I can just encrypt the sender, the receiver, the amount, and then I have perfect privacy. So no one will be able to tell who the sender and the receiver is and how much the amount is. But then again, I lose transparency, because how do I check that the transaction is valid? And here comes in a tool called a zero-knowledge proof of knowledge, which is sort of this magical cryptographic tool, but it allows you to mathematically prove that the transaction is valid without giving up any additional information. So everybody can now check and see that the transaction is valid, but yet all of the other information, so for example, how much money is being transferred, is still private, and only the sender and receiver can see this. And we really want to leverage this technology to build kind of a platform for financial services, so things like peer-to-peer lending platforms and other financial applications.
And this feels like a perfect opportunity to introduce Bulletproofs technology as well. And can I ask that you share your story behind you in actually inventing Bulletproofs technology while at Stanford?
Right. So Bulletproofs is a type of zero knowledge proof, and especially it's one that is very efficient. So the proofs are extremely short, and basically this is stuff. This is work that I started in my first year in my PhD, and it was actually that the Bitcoin core developers, so the people who really work on the Bitcoin technology, I guess they had a meeting with my advisor, and I wasn't originally, I guess, supposed to be in that meeting, but my advisor, I just happened to talk to my advisor before that, and he was like, "Oh, why don't you join?" And the Bitcoin core developers were talking exactly about this problem, of I guess privacy and transparency, and also that they are obviously technically very smart, so they knew about zero knowledge proofs, but they were basically saying that all of the other solutions or the previous zero knowledge proofs were just too inefficient. The transactions would get too large if you employed them. This wouldn't really be practical. So then we worked on this and sort of developed Bulletproofs, which also of course builds on, as always in academia, it builds on a lot of amazing work that others have done. But then we released that, and then the cool thing is that others also took it up and deployed it. So, for example, in Monero, which is a cryptocurrency, they used Bulletproofs and it reduced the fees in Monero by, I think, the transaction fees. So they used Monero to make Bulletproofs to make Monero more efficient, and it reduced the fees in Monero by, I think, like 90% or something along those lines.
And for those people listening that are outside the tech, blockchain, and crypto community, I just want to find out a little bit more about Findora, and especially for those business leaders working in finance, wanting to understand how Findora can actually help their business. Can you just walk me through how easy it would be to get them started and the kind of problems that they could expect to be solved by Findora?
So I think if they're business leaders and have something spikes their interest in this call, then they should definitely reach out to us and go to findora.org and sort of find a way to contact us. But I think the problems that we want to solve are really those things where there's a balance between privacy and transparency. So let me just give another example, and because we're really experts in the technology, and we also have a lot of experts in finance, lots of expertise in finance, and finance is sort of littered throughout finance. There are these problems where there's this need for the balance between privacy and transparency. Because you want to reveal some information, but only exactly this information and nothing else. So, another example is, say, we're a startup and we have some distribution of shares, and there's this thing called cap table management where, for a lot of startups, they want to outsource, or they want to have some public records of how their cap table is managed, so who owns how much of the company. And previously this was maybe just written down in a spreadsheet somewhere, and but now sort of people want to have more serious records of this. But you also want to so now they outsource this, but this is again this is really private information, because maybe not everybody in the company even knows how much each other person has, and maybe you want to also, the founder wants to sell some of the shares of his company because he or she wants to buy a house or stuff like that. But not all of this information should be public. And with the technology that we develop at Findora, you can exactly make sure, though, that all the transactions are correct, that the total shares add up to 100%. You don't want to create shares out of thin air, but no unnecessary information gets leaked. And so these kind of situations are things where our technology can really shine.
And do you have any kind of use cases that you could share with listeners and just help them visualize exactly just how much of a game changer it is? Maybe not immediately, but especially as we head towards the future and everything changes completely.
Right. So one use case that we have is something called a smart investment fund, which we also outlined. And if you go to our website and read our white paper there, we outline that in much more detail. But the idea is that, these I was talking about these funds before, and they have, again, this balance between auditing and privacy. And say I want to have a fund which follows some rules. Maybe it says I only invest in these whitelisted assets, or I follow a certain risk profile. Like I don't, you can actually, there's financial models where you can assign risk profiles to each assets and so on and so forth. And maybe the fund is allowed to freely operate within a risk profile. With our technology right now, we have to either just trust that, mostly we just have to literally trust that they do what they say, and especially sort of hedge funds and more private equity things, they aren't even audited, so there's really no way to check that they're actually doing what they're saying. And so obviously they can't just reveal what exactly they're investing in, because then their competitors would just copy what they're doing. So with these smart investment funds and Findora technology, they can specify the rules, specify sort of the policies, like my risk profile is between this and this, or this set of I'm only investing into shares from this whitelisted that are whitelisted somehow, or and invest in these things, and then prove to a regulator and to their customers that they are following these rules, but within that they have complete freedom. So this allows you to, give a lot more confidence in these funds. This allows them to, have lighter weight regulation, because the regulator is now confident. The regulator now can be confident that everything is going okay. So it can give them, regulation is always good for giving you more security, but it can also stifle innovation. However, when you can have sort of this lightweight cryptographic form of regulation, and by lightweight I mean it's sort of lightweight in the overhead for the company, but it still gives you very, very strong guarantees that basically no other form of regulation can, then hopefully this can lead to more innovation and sort of big changes in the way that the world of finance works, and less fraud, all of these things.
And before you came on the podcast today, I was keeping a lookout on the kind of work that you guys are doing. And I quickly noticed that the Findora team spent some time in Tel Aviv for Blockchain Week. Was there any big talking points at that event? And what was the message that you were delivering to people about Findora at that event?
Right. So we, my Ben, who's the CTO and who also got his PhD from Stanford, and then we've done a lot of work together at on different forms of cryptography. He was at the blockchain week in Tel Aviv and at Scaling Bitcoin, partially, getting people interested and excited about the technology. But he also, we also have we have basically the next iteration of zero knowledge proofs that Ben and I have been working on, and it's called Supersonic. You always gotta have cool names, and because it builds on this other zero knowledge proof called Sonic, and now we have Supersonic. So what is Supersonic? Well, Bulletproofs is, as that I was talking about before, is great because it has very small proofs, but it really only works for sort of small to medium complexity transactions. So if I want to prove to you that a small, low complexity transaction or medium complexity transaction was done correctly, then Bulletproofs is great. However, if I go to large complexity transactions, so I really want to prove to you that my entire fund is following this extremely complicated risk profile, and maybe some other things, then Bulletproofs at some point takes too long to verify. The checking the proof becomes quite inefficient. And with Supersonic, sort of we build on prior work to really remove that component and make it very extremely efficient to verify. And especially we do that. So there's some other zero knowledge proofs called snarks, which are also efficient to verify, but they have one gigantic problem, which is that there's this trusted setup. So you need some trusted party to create a proving key and a verification key. And so proving key for the prover to perform the proof, and a verification key to create the proof, to verify the proof. But the problem is that once they do that, while they do that, they create this thing called basically like toxic waste, which if they don't discard it, or if they're malicious, maybe they cheat, then they can use this toxic waste to create fake proofs. So to make an invalid transaction look valid. And this has huge remedies, because it means, you could create money out of thin air and really destroy a system. So Supersonic and Bulletproofs really, they get around that, so they don't have to rely on this trusted setup. Because, the problem with this trusted setup is that, it's never clear who is supposed to do that, right? Who do we trust in the world to do this trusted setup and then, throw away the toxic material? That's totally, it's really not, the blockchain and is all about decentralizing trust. And this would be a thing that really centralizes trust in a massive way to a single person.
So what's your grand vision for Findora then? And realistically, how long are you away from actually bringing that vision to life, do you think?
I think that I guess the grand vision is that, we can put finance or change the way that finance works, right? That change the way that, reduce the amount of fraud in finance and give investors and more security in that what they're investing in is functioning correctly. And hopefully, this also gives you new innovation in the world of finance and can make things sort of more efficient and hopefully more prosperous. But obviously you need to go in sort of step-by-step things, and the whole world won't change at once. So I think one thing that we're focusing on is special, sort of sub-markets in Asia, for example, where there's more fraud than maybe in the Western world, but also the regulators are more willing to adapt things and change things, and more open to new technology. So this is exactly where we want to start, and then hopefully once things are worked out there, we can expand and grow from there.
Fantastic. And for anyone listening that would like to find out more information about Findora or any of the technology that we've talked about, such as Bulletproofs, what's the best way of finding you guys online, and equally contacting a member of your team or joining your community? What's the best way of doing that?
So it's just Findora.org, so Findora.org, and we have I think all of the contact information out there. Usually, it's just the first name at Findora.org to email someone, and you can. I think we also have a Twitter and such things, but usually the website has a lot of information and has the contact information and links to more information, and you can. This is really the best place to start.
Excellent. Well, I'll add all those links to the show notes and the blog posts that will accompany this episode. But I wish you the best for the future. I love what you're creating here. It's incredibly exciting. But more than anything, just a big thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to come on and explain it to me and the listeners. So thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I loved hearing the story of Benedikt Bunz, inventor of Bulletproofs, which, like I said at the beginning of the show, Bulletproofs is a next-generation form of zero-knowledge proof technology. But I also loved hearing, of course, how Findora is aiming to unlock a new era of finance where users control their own data, their own identity and financial assets, using Bulletproofs to guarantee that confidentiality. So I'm going to be following this story very closely, and how Findora are building this open banking platform and peer-to-peer lending platform and a smart asset ecosystem to boot. But as always, this podcast is not just about me, and it's not just about the guest either, but it's about you getting involved and sharing your insights around this project, about any episode on this podcast. So please, I invite you to share your insights by simply sending me a quick email, techblogwriter@outlook.com, tweet me at Neil C. Hughes, or visit my website, techblogwriter.co.uk. I'm really intrigued on what you thought of today's interview and any big takeaways that you had. So please keep those emails coming in as we race towards 1,000 interviews with tech leaders from all over the world. But I'm afraid we're out of time again. Have no fear, I will be back same time tomorrow. So a huge thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.